Good morning and welcome to the November 19th, 2025 meeting of the Oregon Public Defense Commission. I am Jennifer Nash, the chair of the commission. Before we get started, we do not have any oral public comment and we did not receive any written public comment this morning, so we will not have that. Today we have a couple of action items and I see we do have a quorum of voting members that are present. Commissioner Harris is not here today, and neither is Commissioner Harvey. They were both excused from the meeting today. We have the delinquency attorney standards to vote on that we've seen a number of times, and the commission calendar for 2026. And then the remainder of the commission meeting, which is short this morning, is required training. Commissioner Buckley and I will not be attending the training because we will not be on the commission in about 5 weeks. So we do not need the training. After the action items, Vice Chair Mandenberg will be taking over the meeting and Commissioner Buckley and I will step off. And with that, we will move on to the director's update, which was added yesterday for this morning, was not there by error. And Director Santrigan just wants to give a brief update about some things that have been happening with the agency.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Yes, the update should be relatively brief. We plan to provide a more complete update along with unrepresented crisis information, a 12-month plan update, all of those items in December when we're all in person. So looking forward to that. The primary thing that I wanted to talk about this morning was just to bring the commission up to speed on the status of our litigation with Public Defender of Marion County. I also want to acknowledge that things are still a little bit fluid with that. And so I may not be able to take many or answer hardly any questions, but we do have some plans in the future to make sure that we have a forum for that. And I'll mention that in a few minutes. As you know, OPDC was sued by the Public Defender of Marion County at the beginning of October regarding our 2025-2027 contracts. In this suit, PDMC is seeking to compel us at OPDC to enter into a new contract that's different from others that we've issued across the state to our other providers by removing the contractual provision related to the anticipated caseload, which is measured by an organization's MAC utilization. So last Friday on the 14th, there was a hearing concerning a request for a preliminary injunction in Clackamas County before Judge Wetzel. After hearing oral arguments, the court granted an injunction. So in our contracts, and I'll try to go slowly through this, but certainly if you'd like to look at the contract documents afterwards, it might be helpful. In our contracts, Section N of Exhibit B, it states that if a contractor or any attorney or any of its attorneys shut off for any of the reasons above, and I'll explain that in just a moment, contractor will be responsible for the MAC weight during the shutoff period unless the contractor would like to remove funding from its contract. So the shutoffs that it references above, quote unquote, is referring to the immediate preceding provision, which is Section M, which contains several reasons why attorneys may shut off through various subsections, including, an attorney going on vacation, somebody going on FEMLA leave, illness, and those types of reasons. So what Judge Wetzel's order does, which is, as I understand it, is still in the drafting process, is it grants the preliminary injunction and modifies our Section N of the contract, and specifically excludes from that our ability to require contractors to be responsible for MAC when the shutoff is tied to an attorney reaching their ethical capacity. So the Section N would still apply to the other types of shutoffs. The specific prohibition would just be for ethical shutoffs. We've had a couple follow-up meetings since this happened late on Friday afternoon with DOJ. Those have been somewhat sporadic this week because I've also had a lot of responsibilities at the Capitol. So we have a meeting with DOJ and Chair Nash and myself this afternoon. I believe it's 3 or 3:30, where we'll talk about what next steps look like and really where we move from here. And so I'm sure that you all have many questions about this issue. One thing that we have Mara working on right now is we'd like to add an executive session where we can bring our attorneys from DOJ to discuss this with you in greater detail and to answer questions that you have either at our December 5th meeting. The schedule's a little tight, so we are also exploring the opportunity to have that as a separate executive session, just on its own, either immediately kind of preceding, the few days preceding or after that December meeting. So if you see some communication from Mara trying to find some times, please respond to those as quickly as possible. And that's what that executive session would be covering. I'd be happy to take any brief questions you all have, but I may not be able to answer them at this time. But I wanted to make sure to provide a basic update for everybody just so that we can all be on the same page.
Are there any questions? Okay, it does not look like it. Thank you. Appreciate the
Yes, thank you, Chair.
update. All right, moving on next to the attorney delinquency standards. We've seen these a number of times, both in work session and in public, larger commission meetings. And at this point, we believe that they are ready to move forward to adopt. So I will turn it over just for brief background and any updates that need to be provided to Mr. Arndt, and then we can address the action item. Mr. Arndt.
Good morning, Chair Nash, Vice Chair Mandelberg, and members of the Commission. As the Chair pointed out, the Commission has seen these standards a few times now. We met with them on the work group. Initially, there was concerns about how PCRP would be dealt with by non-PCRP attorneys. During the work session, we submitted what we call PCRP expectations. They are a supplement to the standards. I believe those will come up for a vote next month. I would have had Annie Borton here to answer any questions on those. However, she has decided that her baby has decided that it is more important to be born than for mommy to brief. So if you have any questions on the PCRP standards, I will certainly do my best to answer those, but Annie is our expert on those, and don't hold it against me if I'm a little bit hazy on details.
Does anyone have any questions about the standards that we've not already addressed, or before we move to an action item? All right. So I will ask for a motion to approve the juvenile delinquency performance standards as submitted today, November 19th. Yeah, that's the motion. That's the motion. Commissioner Leininger.
So moved.
And is there a second? All right, Commissioner Leininger makes the motion. Vice Chair Mandelberg, I think, maybe seconds the motion. All right,
Yeah.
And we'll need a roll call vote, Mara.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Chair Nash,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mandelberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Lipscomb,
Yes.
Commissioner Buckley,
Yes.
Commissioner Nab,
Yes.
and Commissioner Leininger.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we forgot Commissioner Engelsman. Oh, no, you did.
She's not effective yet.
Oh, that's right. I knew that. She's here in body and spirit, but not yet voting. That's right. Thank you for reminding me. All right, the motion passes. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. Arndt, and all the agency staff for your very hard work on these. We really, really appreciate this. We know this is a huge lift, and thank you very much. All right, moving on next to the 2026 Commission calendar, which was sent out in the Commission materials and is attached today. And you will see that the 2026 Commission meeting calendar follows the same cadence that it has for this year, 2025, where the work group session will be the first Thursday of, well, not necessarily the first Thursday, all Thursday before the meeting, two weeks before the Commission meeting. And then the commission meeting is the third Wednesday of each month. And the commission meetings are from 9 to 2, and the work group meetings are from 5 to 6:30. And just as a reminder, the work group meetings are voluntary. They're not, attendance isn't kept, but we encourage people to attend. Commissioner Leidiger, you have a question? You're muted. Tom, I can't hear you.
Sorry. I think I may be the reason why we stick to Wednesday, and I wanted to apologize to people for whom Wednesday is difficult. I don't know if there's a reason why our December meeting is always the first Friday of December. I wonder if there's any chance it could be the second Friday of December. I'd offer two reasons for that. One is that it spaces our meetings out more uniformly. And also, it just turns out the first week of December is really crunch time at a law school. But I would totally understand and find a way to go if it has to remain on the first Friday of December.
It does. And there's a reason why the December and the June meetings are set when they are, and that's because they coincide with the OCDLA conferences. And so those meetings are held in the location where those conferences are, where a large number of contractors go. So in December, it's Portland, and that's always the first Friday in December. And in June, it's that second weekend, as opposed to what typically would be the third week of June when we have our meetings. So those are those coincide with those conferences, and they're in person, and that's why they are those dates. Oh, I'm sorry. So you can be excused if you can't make those, but we understand. All right, and I will also say before we do the motion, I just really appreciate Mara's presentation of this. It's very visually wonderful, easy to follow, know exactly where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, and that's very helpful. So thank you for that, Mara. And with that, I will, I'm having trouble this morning because I haven't drank my coffee yet, and I haven't been sleeping very much because of trial prep. So I will accept a motion to adopt the 2026 commission meeting calendar.
So moved.
All right, and a second, I'm assuming from Commissioner Nab. All right,
Yes, second.
and we will need a roll call vote, Mara.
Thank you. Chair Nash,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mandelberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Lipscomb.
Yes, I won't make December though.
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Buckley,
Yes.
Commissioner Nab,
Yes.
and Commissioner Leininger.
Yes, I probably won't make December either, but I will make it next month.
Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you. All right, we have the next meeting is the required training. I don't know. I do see Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, are you ready to get started early on the Enterprise Information Services training?
Sure. Yeah, I can go ahead and pull up the.
Okay, so before
PowerPoint.
that, I just want to say thank you to everyone for remaining in the meeting. This training that you're about to have is required training, and it's been difficult to have people do that training on their own. So that's why there's two reasons why we're having it done during the meeting today. One is it makes it easier for all of you to sit through the training. It's one and done. And the second thing is the hope is that if this is being recorded, and when we have new commissioners come on board, they'll be able to view the training, which is a little more user-friendly than trying to do it in Workday for a lot of folks. All right, and with that, I'll turn over the reins of the meeting to Vice Chair Mandelberg, and Commissioner Buckley and I will bid you farewell for the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Mr. Wilson, when you're ready to start, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little something about yourself before we get into the training, that would be great.
Thanks for having me. Just before we get started, can everybody see that first slide okay?
I can.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, so quick introduction. My name is Jake Wilson. I'm with Enterprise Information Services. We really fall under the DAS agency. And we oversee, my specific role is cybersecurity awareness and training. So we oversee training, phishing simulations, a lot of other fun stuff for all executive branch agencies, but boards and commissions as well. And one of our tasks is rolling out this annual training required for all employees. A little bit about myself. So I started with DAS in April of just this year. I took a little bit of break and went to a nonprofit university for about 5 years, also doing cybersecurity awareness and training for that organization. Prior to that, I was with DAS and then OHA as well, worked in the Information Security and Privacy Office. So been involved in cybersecurity awareness and training for a little over 10 years now. We're going to get through this pretty quickly. I think maybe correct it if I'm wrong. I think we have 45 minutes, but really shouldn't take that long. And I really didn't go through and just copy the slides from the annual training. I just didn't think that'd be very beneficial. So I put together basically just some more customized slides of some of the top risks that employees face, but also individuals face in their personal lives as well. As we go through this, if anybody has any questions, I don't want this to just be a death by PowerPoint where I'm just talking at you the whole time. I'm more than happy to pause, answer any questions, not even if it's just work related. If you have questions about how you could help stay secure in your personal life, keep your family secure, I'm more than happy to address those as well. So any questions before we get started? Okay.
Let me say that I can't see everyone on the screen when the PowerPoint is on. So if you do have a question, just shout out.
Yeah, likewise. I have a couple screens and the little Zoom panel with the members is very, very small. So
Right.
I may not hear you, or if there's a chat, I definitely won't see that. So just to jump into this, one of the first things I just want to mention, and we call this out in the annual training, I promise not every slide is going to be like this. Statutory requirements, why employees have to complete this training. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we do have questions come up from board and commission members, contractors, going, why do I have to take this annual training? And it's really just because of the access to information. Now, some people think, well, I don't have access to I don't have a state device. I'm not issued a state of Oregon laptop or anything like that, but information is verbal, electronic, written. So any of those items, access to that those individuals would be required to complete that training. A couple things we're going to get into today: why information security matters, social engineering, passwords, multi-factor authentication, insider threats, risks with AI, and why it's important to report security concerns and how to do that. And some of these are included in the annual training. Some I've taken a little bit of liberty and included them, even if they weren't. So we'll dive into these a little bit more. So first topic, why information security matters. In short, humans are the primary attack vector for cyber criminals. If you look this up, you'll see various statistics all over the place about why humans, for the longest time, organizations, people in even cybersecurity roles, they would use this term saying, oh, humans are the weakest link. I personally hate that term. I just don't like the word weak, and humans being put together. I think it tells a bad story. And I think if I was, just a general end user, I go, man, the security team's calling me weak, and no, I'm always at fault for this stuff. There's a lot more to it. So I've tried to go away from, and I try to tell this to everyone, like, quit calling humans weak. It's a really dumb saying. Cyber criminals attack humans. That's where they basically send out phishing emails. Phishing is the primary method of attack, primary method. But why do they attack humans? Because we're trusting. We trust individuals. We trust generously. We make mistakes, and our brains work in a lot of different ways with cognitive bias and things like that. And cyber criminals know that, and that's why they attack us. So, but you'll find different metrics or data around humans being basically the cause of a data breach. You'll see 70% 80%, 90%. There's a pretty good report that comes out annually by Verizon. It's called the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. And I think that most recent report for this year, they put the number at 82%. So, but that's not necessarily just individuals accidentally clicking on a phishing email or accidentally downloading software. Downloading software is probably not an accident. They probably do it on purpose, right? But it's also technical roles. So when we say human, it could be downloading software, it could be going to a malicious website, but there's technical roles that are at fault for these data breaches as well. So misconfigured firewalls, somebody goes in and opens up a port or makes a change. They set up email security to try to block phishing emails or spam, and they don't do it correctly. So technical roles are at fault for this as well. And then in addition to the human risk, obviously there's the compliance reasons. There's always compliance mandates. NIST 853, that's one that the state goes off of. For payment card industry, PCI DSS, GLBA, there's NIST 871, European Union, GDPR. So there's a lot of different mandates. I don't really like to look at the compliance side of things, even though, I put up that statutory requirements slide, and that's really a compliance slide. But really, we do this to train employees on information security risks, kind of the top threats. And we do that with the goal of hopefully changing behaviors over time. Now, I have my own thoughts on whether or not, behaviors are going to change in 45 minutes after taking an online training. But that's a whole different topic that we won't get into. So, all right, let's talk about social engineering. If you just were to look up the term social engineering, you'll probably find this. This is a pretty common one in the cybersecurity space or information security space. I remember getting an email a long time ago from the Oregon Department of Transportation saying, "Hey, stop using the term social engineering. That doesn't mean what we use it for in Department of Transportation." And there's some other descriptions or definitions as well. But really, social engineering, it's an art by basically con artists to manipulate individuals or influence them into taking an action that's really against their best interest or against an organization's best interest. And they do that to just try to gain sensitive information, usually for financial gain, steal information, sell it on the dark web, and things like that. But within social engineering, there's a lot of different. There's a handful of basically a subset of different tactics that fall under social engineering, and that's what we're going to really look at on this next slide. So, number one, I mentioned this earlier, is phishing. Phishing, I forget what the number is, but there's billions and billions of phishing emails sent every day. Phishing is basically, think of an attacker, maybe an individual, more often than not, like an organized cybercrime group or a nation state actor like North Korea, Russia, Iran, that are sending out phishing emails, hoping that individuals are going to click on a malicious link. Sometimes those malicious links might start a download that has a malicious document designed to steal information, maybe get saved on a computer that has a keylogger. A lot of times, phishing emails, they'll direct an individual to a malicious website with a landing page that maybe mimics an organization's real landing page for a login page. And they'll just try to steal usernames and passwords. So they steal the usernames and passwords. They could log in as that individual, take actions on their behalf, get into files, systems, steal information. That's why multi-factor authentication helps, but we'll talk about that in a future slide. These are a lot of random terms that you may not have seen before, and I wouldn't expect you to remember them. But if you see them pop up in the future, you'll kind of have an understanding. So phishing is email. Vishing is phone scams. So it's like phishing, but V is for voice. So those phone scams you get, that's referred to as vishing. Smishing is basically your text message scams. Now it's called smishing because SMS, which I think is short message service, that's kind of the abbreviation for that. So smishing is your text scams. A new term that I think just came out maybe during COVID is quishing. It's kind of a weird word, but QR codes. So individuals, if you guys probably, I'm sure most people remember, and they've still stuck around, QR codes were huge a few years ago. Every single restaurant you went to, they stopped handing out menus and they had QR codes, on the tables to scan the menus. There's QR codes on parking meters. You see QR codes on telephone poles. You see them almost everywhere. But somebody came up with this term. I'm not sure who, but it's a pretty common tactic that cyber criminals are starting to use because you can't really see the website that you're going to when you scan a QR code. You scan it, it'll maybe show a quick preview of the URL, which most people may not look at, and it'll go to the website. So you're already potentially visiting a malicious website. So I just call this out because it's important to be careful scanning QR codes if you don't know where they're coming from, if you're out of place. And it's easy for people to swap those. I mean, you go to a restaurant, somebody can easily take off the QR code of menu, put on a different one, and then you could be visiting some malicious website. Another term that falls under social engineering is really piggybacking or tailgating. It doesn't sound like this would be a pretty common tactic or, oh, this would never happen. It happens pretty frequently. Social engineers, again, they're con artists. They'll sneak in behind somebody to try to get access to a restricted area in hopes of gaining sensitive information. They'll try to get into a server room. They'll plug in a USB thumb drive into something or try to look around laptops. So it's a pretty common tactic and it still happens pretty frequently. Dropped USB drives, again, humans, we're curious by nature. A lot of times we want to help individuals out. So again, cyber criminals know this. So if one of us finds a USB drive, what most people would do is probably put it in their computer because we want to see what's on it, for one, and then potentially maybe try to get it back to its rightful owner. Who knows what's on that USB drive, but this stuff happens pretty frequently. I should also mention with USB drives, kind of outside of social engineering. I mean, cyber criminals use this for malicious reasons, but dropped USB drives, it's really important to not put sensitive information on a USB drive, especially if it's unencrypted. So if you just have a USB drive that you picked up on Amazon or Best Buy or something like that, if it's not encrypted, meaning anybody could really go in and access that information, and really avoid using that method. I've seen this happen before and this has happened in real life, where an organization, somebody is transporting sensitive information on a USB drive, they accidentally lose it, somebody picks it up, finds it, that's naturally a data breach, of course. It's a security incident. Ransomware. Ransomware really falls under kind of the phishing. A lot of ransomware is delivered via phishing methods, but it could also happen other reasons. If you're visiting a malicious website and download malware or anything of that nature. Ransomware is huge. Cyber criminals, it's one of the main tactics they use because it often leads to success. Ransomware, if you don't know what ransomware is, it's basically where an organization, cyber criminal organization, or an individual would basically keep files hostage and encrypt them so the organization's not able to access them. There's been a lot of mention of this in the news recently. So DEQ was a ransomware incident. That Curry County incident that happened a while back, that was a ransomware incident. Most recent incident, state of Nevada, I think it really started in April, and they released more information around August. And that was a nightmare for a lot of individuals in the state of Nevada. They couldn't log in to pay taxes. They couldn't, all the business stuff was basically shut down. Employment department, DMV, a lot of different things. So it's a huge moneymaker. Ransomware, the best advice we get is don't pay the cyber criminals because they're going to keep doing it if they're making money. So with ransomware, you don't want to pay the cyber criminals that are responsible for putting ransomware on your machine. And if you do pay it, they're criminals. Who knows if they're actually going to release the information? Most likely they would, because in a weird way, they're professionals and they want to continue doing transactions and show that, hey, we'll give you your files back if we make money. But even in addition, some organizations choose to pay the ransom to get their files back. And then the organization might come back and go, well, okay, we gave you access to your files, but we want a little bit more money so we don't release them to other individuals. I think with like the DEQ example, it wasn't paid. Curry County wasn't paid. State of Nevada wasn't paid. And then DEQ, so those files were basically just leaked on the dark web. They were for sale for other organizations to use that information. So it's sensitive information of individuals, Oregonians, in that nature. So, all right, moving on. Passwords and passphrases. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and I could probably spend a long time talking about passwords and passphrases, but I won't bore you with it. Pretty cool little chart that shows the time it takes a hacker to brute force your password. So when we think about passwords, passwords are really cracked using computer programs. It's not somebody, every now and then somebody might go in and try to guess a password, by gathering information about an individual online. But really what happens is a company is compromised in a data breach, like maybe usernames and passwords. No, those passwords aren't stored in plain text. They're stored as what's called hashes, which I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but when you go in and let's say you sign up for a Facebook account, you put in your email address, you put in your password. Facebook isn't storing your password as, let's just say your password is password 123. They're not storing password 123. They're storing it as what's called a hash. And there's different hashing algorithms. But when an organization is involved in a security incident, let's say the usernames and passwords are hashed, those cyber criminals are getting access to those hashed passwords. And those hashed passwords are put in through a computer program, and they're basically being they're getting cracked by that computer program. These computer programs will make like billions of guesses every single second. Kind of depends how strong the computer is, the program they're running. But cyber criminals will take a known list of hashed passwords that have already been cracked. So, a weak password like password 123, that hash is already known, in a lot of instances. So if you use a weak password, the cyber criminals get access to the usernames, hash passwords list, your password's going to be cracked instantly. So it's really important to use a strong password. Now, for the longest time, security practitioners, the people making the rules around passwords, we did a pretty poor job. I say we, I wasn't even involved in it, but they did a pretty poor job of providing guidance. We always said, hey, use an 8-character password, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, exclamation points, add a number, things like that. It really was, they didn't realize until several years ago that it's really not the best practice. A better practice is length beats complexity. So you don't need to have a longer password, even if you don't have uppercase and lowercase special characters. A longer password's going to be much better than that shorter, complex password. Now, if you have a long password and you add the special characters and uppercase and lowercase to it, it just makes it that much better. So keep that in mind when you're creating passwords. For the state of Oregon, for our access to IT systems, it's 15 plus characters, which is great. Unfortunately, we still have that requirement that it needs to be changed, I think every 60 days. That might be going away, and that's another best practice that federal guidance has put out is length beats complexity, and you don't need to change your password frequently, every 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You really don't need to change your password unless you know that it's been involved in a data breach. So that's additional guidance, for the longest time. It was poor guidance. We'd say, hey, create your complex password. 60 days is up. Go ahead and change it. Then what does everybody do? They change the 1 to a 2, or the 2 to a 3, or the 3 to the 4. All of those are very likely, and if you have a short password, that hash has probably been cracked. And cyber criminals take all that into account. So down here at the bottom, these are examples of let's just say your password is password. It's going to be cracked instantaneously. They already know that hash. You get creative, you add an uppercase, a 1, exclamation, it's going to be cracked instantaneously. That's a known hash. And then we go, oh, let's get super creative. Let's replace that A with the @ symbol. Let's put some $signs for the S. Cyber criminals have already taken that into account because it's very likely on that list of their hashed passwords. That's a bad password. We're getting a little bit better by using that length piece when we have strong password 1 exclamation point. But an even better one is a passphrase, something that makes sense really to only you. Now, I'm using the word password and passphrases as examples. Those really aren't good examples, but if you have a long sentence like a song lyric or a movie quote, something that you like that's easy to remember, that's really the best type of password to use. If you don't want to use something that long, 3 or 4 words that make sense to only you are a great option also. For example, like if your favorite food is tacos, use tacos. If you like vinyl records, add the word vinyl in there. And then maybe your favorite vacation spot. None of those 3 words are necessarily tied together unless you're going into Facebook and answering those quizzes and things like that about your favorite food and favorite vacation spot and all that. But so really passphrases are better than passwords. They're long, easy to remember, easy to recall. And then we really need to be using unique passwords and passphrases for all of our accounts. And I know that sounds mind-boggling because I just looked in my passwords app and I think I have over 300 different accounts that I have. And I'm supposed to have a different password for all of those. So try not to reuse your passwords. If you need help remembering them, which most of us probably do, password managers are really the way to go. I can't recommend anything from an official state of Oregon employee, but I would say in my personal life, I use the built-in passwords app on my iPhone. It'll show me if I'm reusing passwords already. Google or Android has one as well. Their Google Password Manager. They're great. And they have strong encryption, so they're pretty secure. That was a lot on passwords. We'll move on here real quick. More than happy to answer any more questions about that if you have them.
I have a quick question. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's okay.
Yeah, so quick question. So I see a lot, like it seems like every time I open something that's got a password that I get a message saying this has been involved in a data breach. It just constant. So I feel like I'm just always having to change passwords. And I also wonder how naive is it to just ignore that message thinking, I mean, if it's like like Fred Meyer, for example, right? Like your app for Fred Meyer, there's millions of people who have Fred Meyer app information. And so if there's a cyber breach, I don't even know what that means, and they've got millions of passwords, are they able to link that to me? Do I really need to change my password? Like, can you talk briefly about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know what? I'll show you. I wasn't going to do this, but I will real quick because I think it'd be cool to give you a quick demo here. And it should not take too much time. Find that share button again here. Okay, so everyone should see this Have I Been Pawned website. Do you see that? Can you guys see that website okay? Okay. Sorry. So this is a great website and it's totally safe. It was created by somebody, security practitioner. I would recommend everybody to do this. So you could type in your email address here and it will show if your account has been involved in a data breach. Now, these are known public data breaches that have been identified. So obviously there's data breaches. If they haven't been found out yet, it's not going to be in here. There's also a password section on this website. Now, if you type in a generic password, like I'm typing in the password 123. Now, if I use that as a password, it's going to show that it's been involved over 2 million times in data breaches. Now, if you have a very unique password that you go, no one's probably ever used this password, you could type it in here and check. It'll show you if it's been involved in a data breach. Now, what's even better, I think, which I really like, is you could type in your email address here, and I'll just type in noemail@gmail.com. It's a generic one. If I hit check, you could put in your personal email address here. It's going to show that this email address has been involved in 294 data breaches. Now, what's nice is you could scroll down here. There's a timeline showing which data breaches occurred and what was exposed. So, for example, if I scroll down here, Alliance Life, I think that was a life insurance company. It basically describes the attack, the type of compromised data. Okay. Keep going down here. Okay. Data troll stealer logs. Passwords were involved in that. And then in some instances, they'll probably say hashed passwords. So there's a lot on here. Let me see if I could find a good example here. Usernames, passwords. Okay, so if I click on like Land Air Sea, I'm not sure what this company is, but 337,000 unique customer email addresses, username and password hashes. So I mentioned a lot of organizations, they're not storing passwords as plain text. They're storing them as hashes. Now, some companies, you go through here, you'll find companies that have been involved in a data breach and it'll say plain text passwords. Now, if that's the case, cyber criminals aren't doing anything. They just have access to that information. It's probably uploaded on the dark web somewhere. They could download it or pay for it, and they have your information instantaneously. That's why it's important to have that unique password, because the first thing they'll do is go, all right, here's Stephanie's email address. Here's Stephanie's password, the plain text password, or even the password that we cracked. Let's go try to find what other accounts that individual has, their Chase account, Wells Fargo, whatever it is, and they'll try using that information. So that's why that unique passwords thing comes in. So I would say if you get that information, like if you see something that says this password's been reused, it may not necessarily be tied to you. It means somebody somewhere used that password and it's been involved in a data breach and they're recommending you should change it. So you want to create something a little more unique. But this is an absolutely great website to go in here. This is a very high number. 294 data breaches is a lot. I'm not sure whose email address that is. But even myself, my personal email address, it's in there a lot. LinkedIn, Zynga, which is the Words with Friends games from years ago. There's all these data breaches that happen that we don't even know about because they don't make it on the news. The news will run one segment on, a big data breach, and then, a week later, another one happens that's even maybe larger in scale, and we actually don't even hear about it because, it doesn't need to be on the news again. So, all right, let me go ahead and
Thank
try
you.
to share does that help?
Yeah, I ran my email address. It's kind of scary. I'm gonna make some changes.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, it's a great tool. And I would say for everyone, if you want to use that website, it's good to do it every now and then. And if your password's on there in a data breach, just go in and change your password. It's again, that information's already out there. Change the password for that website, but then you also want to go in and if you can, set up multi-factor authentication as well. So, okay. Everybody see that slide again, that first slide? Okay, let me jump back to where we were. Yeah, and if anybody wants to chat about this more, I'm more than happy to jump on a call with anyone and walk through things and stuff. I love doing this stuff, and that's why I'm here at the state of Oregon, one of them. All right, so that's how to check for password compromises. Let's see if this is working. There we go. I mentioned multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, that's what's really going to help stop those attackers from getting access to your account. Multi-factor authentication, basically with your password, that's only one factor. You log in with your email address, your password, that's a single factor of a way to authenticate with the application to which you're trying to access. Now, when you have multiple methods of authentication set up, you basically have something you have, something you are, something you know. So the one-time passcodes, or you'll see them as called OTPs, that's something you have. It's something that's being sent to you via text, via email. In some instances, there's hardware tokens. That's what I have to log into my state workstation. So I have a little USB-C thumb drive that I put in. I have to put in my password, then I have that token to get access to it. Something a little more stronger than the one-time passcodes and hardware tokens or fingerprint scans, facial recognition. It's really hard to replicate that information for cyber criminals. So those are going to be a stronger method of authentication. So set this up anywhere you can. It's basically just adds that additional layer of security to stop cyber criminals from getting access. The one-time passcode, I do want to mention, when you're setting that up, usually you have the option to get a text message or an email. It's always better to set up an email, especially if that email has that multi-factor authentication already set up as well. If you get a one-time passcode sent to your phone, there's a pretty common tactic cyber criminals use called SIM swapping, where they'll actually convince somebody maybe at a call center or a phone store to swap SIM cards and give basically your number to the SIM card that they have access to, and then all of a sudden they're getting your text messages and things like that. It sounds like, oh, that'll never happen. Happens pretty frequently. Pretty common. SIM swapping is a pretty common tactic used. All right. Real quick, talking about insider threats. This sounds like a scary word. It's really not, I just don't think there's a better word that's come up for it. Insider threats they fall under a few different categories. They could be malicious, they could be negligent or careless insiders. I mentioned earlier the human risk side of things, how humans, we make mistakes. A lot of the security incidents that happen or data breaches happen, not because of malicious individuals, but because we make a mistake. We simply make an accident. We accidentally click on a phishing email. We want to download an application to make our jobs easier, our lives easier, make things quicker. Now, we might have done that intentionally, but we didn't mean to install malicious software along with that application. So there's a handful of different types of insider threats worth calling out. So malicious insiders, is exactly how it sounds. They're malicious. There was an individual at Tesla that sold employee at Tesla sold information to a foreign group. Google, there's a well-known, you guys, I would imagine, maybe have heard about it, individual that worked for Google and Waymo, and he stole a lot of the AI around like the self-learning or self-driving vehicles, took that to a competitor. That's basically a malicious insider. Fraudsters, corporate spies, Yahoo, for example, they had an employee that sold information to a competitor. Coca-Cola had a good example where somebody was trying to steal the secret ingredient on how to make Coca-Cola, and it was like an admin this was years and years ago. Negligent or careless insiders, that's basically people that already have access to information. Myself, my coworkers, any employee with the state of Oregon, we have access to information. We might be a phishing victim. We might knowingly violate policy or accidentally violate policy. Policies can be very difficult to read sometimes. Most people don't read them. We accidentally violate policy. That's a negligent or careless insider. Accidental insiders. Microsoft is a good example. There was a couple of individuals at Microsoft that I think they installed an application and accidentally released a bunch of information. Third-party insiders, not quite the insiders we're talking about, but third parties. They have access to a lot of information as well. That Target data breach that happened, I think it was back in 2015. It was because an HVAC contractor of Target, I think if I remember right, they might have been phished and gave up some credentials. And for some reason, that HVAC contractor had access to the payment card information, credit card information of Target customers. Why? That's a whole different story. Obviously, should have never had that access, but third-party insiders is a pretty big deal as well. So, all right, risks with AI. I know we're almost running out of time here, or I'm getting close to the end. So, these are pretty self-explanatory. I think most people are aware of the risks with AI. Things are changing all the time, but AI, I think it's awesome. A lot of people love it. Some people absolutely hate it, and I could kind of see why. I use it for just random little things here and there, and I go, wow, this is pretty impressive. But it's given me a lot of wrong information at times as well. So risks with AI, really, it's similar to, if you upload a document to like a third-party unapproved cloud storage, like just say Google Drive's not approved for organizational use. If we upload a document there, we no longer have control of that document. It's not adhering to our data classification policy. We don't have the protections, for data loss prevention around that. Somebody owns that document. The same thing kind of happens when you use AI tools, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT or Grok or Claude. I mean, there's a bunch of them out there. DeepSeek, which is a big no-no from China. But as soon as we put information out there, we have no idea what that large language model or that AI tool is going to do with it. They might use it to train its AI, and then all of a sudden, and even if it's hard for another individual to go in and try to find that. The organization that runs that AI tool would have access to that information. And that's a security incident. It's a data breach of individuals' information. So you have to be very cognizant of what you input into AI tools. So Oregon, of course, has data classification policy levels 1 through 4. Really, if it's not public information, it should not be going into an AI tool. Now, some agencies, I'm not sure if yours, if the commission does, but they have access to Microsoft Copilot. So a lot of agencies are beginning to get access to that. Now, that is approved for use up to a certain level. I think it's just level 2, if I remember correctly. But we're still not asking, we still don't want employees to put in level 3 or level 4 information even into approved AI tools. Every agency is going to be different. Some have new tools that they're spinning up that they're creating themselves. Some are going with vendors and things like that. But just be very aware, if you're using AI tools, what you're putting in there. Another risk with AI is the information that you get back. I think sometimes people go in and go, oh, this is great. They're just giving me a bunch of information. I'm going to copy it, paste it. They will give you wrong information. I just saw this a couple weeks ago. I was trying to find some new mower blades for my riding lawnmower, and I put in all this information, the exact model, year, this, that, and it totally gave me the wrong mower blades. And I caught it, and I go, hey, this is wrong. And they go, oh, sorry about that. It's like, yeah, good thing I didn't buy these and, waste a bunch of time and money and go out and install them and stuff. But I mean, that's just a silly example. But these AI tools will provide incorrect information. So you have to be very careful with the information that you're getting back, of course. Same AI tools might have a little bit of bias to them. So just be aware of that. Another topic under AI is deepfakes. Now, it might sound kind of like a buzzword, but this stuff happens pretty frequently. There was a organization in Hong Kong, I believe it was, where an employee was tricked. They thought they were talking to the CEO of an organization, and I think it was like $25 million that they accidentally wired or something like that. Thought I had a note here. Yeah, $25 million Hong Kong finance worker scammed via deep fake video call. So they had basically somebody that looked and sounded like the CEO of this company requesting urgent payments from this individual. And I'm surprised that individual had access to send that information, but $25 million. So this stuff actually is happening in the real world. So Samsung was another example. Samsung, they had to ban ChatGPT. They had engineers basically going in using ChatGPT, and they leaked a bunch of source code of internal applications. And this has happened quite a bit. So just be aware of, the deepfakes thing as well. Again, it sounds like a buzzword, but it's happening pretty frequently. And if you look real cases up, you'll see a lot of real life scenarios and people that have been tricked out of money and some pretty horrible stuff. So social engineering, we talked about social engineering earlier. It's getting a lot more sophisticated with AI. You're not going to see very likely you're not going to see like the typos and the bad grammar and spelling errors and things like that you saw in the old school phishing emails. Cyber criminals can use AI to craft some very convincing phishing emails, or spear phishing emails, which is a term we didn't go over, but spear phishing is really targeted to the individual. So they could go in, put in somebody's name, and they could go to the commissioner's website, public defense commissioner's website, find information about you, maybe your LinkedIn, and create a very convincing targeted email to you in just a matter of seconds. So it's going to be probably getting a lot harder to identify phishing emails as they come in. And then risks with AI, or another item under here is compromised applications. So we have to be very aware of the applications we're using and downloading for work. So there's plugins on browsers, there's different AI tools that pop up. When we're downloading those applications, they're really kind of outside of the network, or especially with the state of Oregon, we don't know about them. We can't really scan those applications to see if they're vulnerable, meaning if they need patched, if they have bad code written in them, if there's malware embedded within that code. So there's applications that get spun up all the time by cyber criminals. They put it out there and somebody downloads it. It could be malicious. So just be very aware of the tools that you're using as well. So I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat here. I'm not going to go to our policies page and read the policies. I don't think anybody would really love that. But I would ask everyone at some point, if I can get the chat up here, let's see, to go to, those are the policies, and those are included in at the end of our annual training. We do have on that same page, the directives around AI guidance. There's some AI guidance. AI is, I mentioned this earlier. I mean, it's a new topic for a lot of organizations. AI has been around for years and years and years, but the widespread adoption of it is pretty new. So there's not, from the DAS side or EIS side, really an official policy around AI usage, but there's some directives and guidance in there about when it can't be used, what applications to avoid, and things like that. Another link that I would like to throw in the chat here is to the EIS Cybersecurity Services website. Now, we do have some October Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We have some content still from October up there. But at the very bottom of the page, there's some great tools and resources that are out there. Not necessarily just for you in your line of work, but protecting your kids, families as well. Things around cyberbullying, cybersecurity for kids. So those are some great resources. They're at the very bottom in one of those accordions. So feel free to check that out. And then last but not least, does anybody have, we've reached pretty much the end. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. I know that was a lot of information. I apologize if it was a little boring. I know not cybersecurity isn't everybody's favorite topic, but hopefully it was informative and you learned a little bit that you could take away and put into practice today. If anybody has any questions, there is my contact information. You are more than welcome to reach out to me. You can email me, hit me up on Teams if that's easier. That QR code, I did this for a presentation I did at U of O a while ago. So that's a LinkedIn QR code. It's not quishing. It's not a scam or anything like that. But if you do want to connect on LinkedIn, I just have the same slide up there. So that's why it's there. But you can scan that QR code. It's safe, I promise. Other than that, I am all set and I appreciate everyone's time. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you all for having me.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wilson. This was one of the better cybersecurity lectures that I've seen. So I appreciate.
Good. That's great.
Everybody's presenting them these days, so that's a good thing. Appreciate your input and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. We are on a break until 10:15, and the next training that's going to come on at 10:15 is super, super, super important because it's about public meetings laws and what we can and can't do to communicate with each other. Do I have that right, Christy?
Actually, the public meetings detailed presentation will be done in the future by two other DOJ attorneys. This is for board training, board duties, and board practices.
I think I was just hopeful that I would get the other quicker because it's really a problem. Okay, board training, equally as important and essential for all of us. So I'll see everybody back here at 10:15. Mara, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so it's 10:10. I think we can get started. Okay, I hope everybody is back. Most people have their cameras off, but I'm going to assume good faith that people are here. So Christy, if you'd like to begin, I think it's all yours.
Thank you. Let me share my screen first, and then we'll start with some introductory comments. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
I can, so I assume everybody else can too.
Wonderful. And can everyone still hear me?
Again, I can.
Okay. And lastly, I just want the board to understand that I can't see your faces when I'm presenting due to the Zoom setup. So if at any point during the presentation you would like to slow down or ask questions, please verbally just state that. I welcome it. It's not an interruption, but I won't be able to see hands or any indications visually. So with that, do we have everybody back so we can start on this training? And if you could please indicate, somebody could please indicate verbally, that would help.
Well, let me go through the list. I'm here. I see Stephanie's face. Tom, are you here? He's not back yet. I see Philippe. I see Caitlin. Paul, are you here? I don't see Paul.
Well, I'll leave it to the chair to direct me to continue. I do know that I was slated to start at 10:15.
Well, oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was 10:15. Let's wait 2 minutes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'm evidently visually challenged in reading the small print time on my computer screen.
I am visually challenged as well, so I understand. We can get the niceties out of the way.
I see Tom is here.
Okay.
And I think we're still waiting for Paul. So let's go ahead and wait till 10:15.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Christy.
Hello. I can't see anybody, so I'll say hello, but I can't really see who's saying hello.
This is Tom Leininger, also a parent of a South Eugene High School student. What's the latest on Caden? How's Caden doing?
He decided college wasn't for him, which was odd. And he is seeking an EMT licensure.
That's great work.
Yeah. Weird for an economics math major, but whatever works, right?
He'll do more good in the world than, a lot of people who end up taking different paths. So,
yeah, we'll see.
It's not forever.
I don't know how a kid who walks around with a pocketbook of Nietzsche in his back pocket doesn't want to go to college, but that is another subject for another day.
A lawyer I used to work with quit law and became an EMT, if that matters.
Not a bad gig, especially if you get on with a fire district.
the year I was coaching debate, the state champion debater decided not to go to college and become an EMT.
Yep.
Someone from Oak Hill High School.
Well, I think it is 10:15 now. Paul Lipscomb, are you with us or not? Evidently not. And I think in about a couple of minutes, maybe we can stop and see if he's joined us. So please go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you all for gathering. I want to confirm with staff that this is scheduled for an hour. Is that correct?
I have this scheduled for until 11:45.
Oh, perfect. That's even better.
Yeah.
So, my name is Christy Munson. I'm a DOJ attorney, and I'm your staff's contact counsel for basic issues of governance, agency authority, public records, ethics, all of that. You also have DOJ counsel for contracts, that's separate from what I do, and for litigation and trial matters, which is separate from what I do. Just a brief statement about my background. I've spent the last 20 plus years advising cities and special districts and counties on board operations, council and commission operations. So this training will touch not only on the legal authorities and legal issues, but also best practices for being a board, because it's not intuitive and it doesn't come easy. And frankly, some of the most significant challenges with being a board member, in my experience, come from either people who own their own business and are used to making decisions quickly, or lawyers, because we're always challenging no matter where we go, right? And you have both of those people on your board. So I want to help smooth the way and make sure you don't experience some of the challenges that are pretty common to board members. Today, we will be discussing these issues. First, we'll go over commission authority and duties. When I say commission, I'm referring to the agency. And we'll be discussing where your authority comes from. It's purely statutory. And so you can only do that which the statute prohibits. We'll also be discussing individual board issues and board member issues, including your authority and duties. This is probably one of the most important subjects that I'll be discussing with you today, and here's why. Any liability issues that you may have as a board member are likely to stem from stepping outside of your authorized lane. So, knowing what your authority is and is not is super important for your own personal pocketbook and peace of mind. And so we'll be going over that. Luckily, you don't have a lot of tasks, duties, and authorities in the statute, and we'll talk about that. That's a good thing. And we'll also, after that, after you are familiar with the commission and board authorities and duties, we'll talk about some board best practices, the art of meetings, why we cannot, even though we'd like to, communicate and make decisions and deliberate like we would normally do, because boards are strange creatures and are subject to some constraints that can be frustrating, but we'll talk about that. If we are still on time, I'll briefly touch on liability issues involving board members. Frankly, I think that you're protected, and most of our other parts of the presentation will talk to you about your staying in your lane. So if we are running short, we'll skip these 3 slides and move on to public meetings and public records. Public meetings, you're going to have a comprehensive training later on in the month from 2 of the attorneys in my section who are excellent. And they are also OGEC counselors and former local government. And one of them is a former local government attorney. So they know public meetings inside and out. So this will just be a brief intro. And we'll talk about some public records issues that are specifically applicable to boards and board members. And lastly, and I don't want to miss time for the government ethics conflict of interest discussion. So if indeed we are running late, we'll skip the liability, and we can always address that later for you. Any questions? All right, I'm going to assume silence is assent, which is what my father always said.
Let's stop
yes.
a minute and see if Paul Lipscomb is with us. Paul, if you're with us, can you please indicate that? Evidently not. Okay, thank you. Please go on.
I won't take it personally. All right. So commission authority. The commission as an agency is statute driven. Unlike other governments in Oregon, they do not have plenary authority to do whatever they want. Agencies are creatures of the statute, and to be able to do anything at all, it has to be either expressly laid out in your statutes or impliedly laid out in your statutes. And so your staff understands what their duties are and are not and can guide you regarding those issues. As you know, the OPDC statute is ORS Chapter 151, which lays out statutory obligations. The statutory obligations for your agency are laid out in 151-216. The statutory obligations for board membership and the conditions of board membership and individual member duties are laid out in ORS 151-213, which we'll be discussing in more detail. And lastly, for your executive director duties, they're laid out in 151-219. So let's talk about board member duties. It's pretty simple, maybe deceptively so. ORS 151-213, 6, sub 6 says, all members of the commission, voting and non-voting, shall review the policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines required under the portion of the statute that talks about commission duties, which is 151-216. And all members will provide input before any approval vote. They will also review the agency request budget of the commission and provide input before the approval vote, which is put before the voting members of the commission. And lastly, meet as necessary to carry out these duties. There are not a broad range or free flow of duties here. All the board reviewing staff policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines to effectuate commission duties under 151-216. The voting members, and that's in this section, sub B, the voting members of the commission then shall approve, and it says approve by majority vote. We'll talk about what that means for you. The policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines discussed by the entire commission, which includes non-voting members, and put it forward to a vote. Lastly, approve by majority vote the agency request budget that the staff puts forward to you. So that's it. Deceptively simple, but arguably requires quite a bit of subject matter expertise because you are in charge of reviewing and voting on all policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines to effectuate the commission duties. And staff and your chair working together with you create agendas for your meetings that are focused on those efforts. And we can talk about the creation, we will talk about the creation of agendas later on in this presentation. And we'll also talk about your quorum and voting requirements. So if you could hold questions about that. But are there any questions at all about this deceptively simple description of your individual board member duties and authorities? And recall, I can't see you. So if any hands are raised, I can't see them. So I'll just need a verbal. Are we not seeing any questions so far?
I don't see any questions. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, thanks. Then we'll go on. So there are also prohibitions on what you're allowed to do as a board member in Oregon statute, which is fairly rare. The members of the commission, y'all, cannot make any decision regarding the handling of any individual case, have access to any case file, or, and this is important and this is strong language, interfere with the executive director or staff in carrying out professional duties involving legal representation of public defense clients. So that has not been tested, but it is some strong language. You're not allowed to interfere. Don't really know what that means. But in the past, some courts reviewing other board, commission, council actions have construed that fairly broadly, meaning going around your executive director or staff to talk to perhaps the governor's office or legislators about decisions that staff is making on that involve the legal representation of public defense clients. These would involve likely your MAC standards, things like that. Anything that staff is carrying out that would affect or involve legal representation of public defense clients. I have to say that is fairly narrow compared to other rules, policies, and procedures, which often really constrain board members, saying shall not try to interfere or influence any executive director or staff member regarding their duties, including their hiring and firing of staff. So statutorily, this is more narrow than what we usually see in board rules and procedures. It's also important to recognize that House Bill 2614, which brought you over to the executive side, executive branch, and made significant changes, also removed a prior authority, which you no longer have. It allowed the commission and commission members to advocate for or against legislation before the legislature. And that has been taken away. And so the members of the commission no longer have that express authority.
I have a question about that, Christy. So my understanding about this is that we no longer can go before a legislative committee, for example, and advocate as a commission member. But my understanding is that I could go before a committee and say, I am testifying as an individual in my personal capacity. Is that okay?
So that would depend a lot on your internal policies and procedures. And in fact, I've reviewed your most recent bylaws, which were adopted April 17th, 2024, that expressly say that you may, in your personal capacity, do those things, but you'll have to state you're appearing in your personal capacity.
Okay, so our bylaws are currently being revised. We're working on that. So if we want people to be able to testify in their personal capacity, we need to keep that in there in so many words.
I think it would be wise to do so. And here's why. While you likely already have the authority to testify in your personal capacity, given constitutional protections, I think it's very wise for all of you to come to a common understanding about what process and what notification you will give each other if you intend to testify in your personal capacity. First, as your current bylaws already state, that you're going to notify the people to whom you're testifying that you're going to be testifying on your personal capacity and not as a representative of the commission or conveying any position of the commission. But other considerations that boards often put into their rules are, and you'll notify staff and commission members of your plans to do so. Some boards and commissions ask for a summary of what you're going to say, and you can decide together if indeed those are some expectations that you want to set as a board and agree to them as a board. I think the best policy for that is one that upholds the concept of no surprises, because we don't want to throw a wrench in any commission machinery mistakenly or by not completing the communication loop. So,
thank you. That's very helpful. And I wanted to say that we've seen that Commissioner Lipscomb is now with us, so we're happy to welcome him back. Thanks.
thank you. All right, so that's board member prohibitions. Let's talk about your job description as board members generally. And this is where this is getting outside of our statutory law and talks about your general duties as board members. It applies corporate concepts. However, these concepts are very real and apply to all boards. The first thing I have to say about this is really a word of caution from my past experience advising boards for 20 years. I think it's really important for each of you to take a personal inventory about why you were interested in being appointed and what your reasons for wanting to be appointed or for accepting an appointment were versus your duties now that you are appointed. And here's why. I've advised many county and city councils and commissions where legitimate city councilors and commissioners ran as a fight the power candidate, that they were not happy with what was happening and they wanted to make change. Absolutely, completely your policy perspective. And I will go to the mat to defend people's right to do that. However, I would urge you to also consider what and weigh that drive for change against your duties and identity as an appointed board member now. The first corporate duty you have is a duty of loyalty to the board. What does that mean? That doesn't mean that you have a duty of loyalty to vote whatever way the majority votes, or doesn't mean that you have to agree with everybody. What it means is that you will always keep the interest of the commission and the board at the forefront of all your decisions, eschewing any inclination to vote in your own personal benefit or for the benefit of others with whom you might agree, who are perhaps also trying to seek that change. When seated at your board, wearing your board hat, your duty of loyalty lay with the board. And reforming the board is part of being loyal, but it also means no surprises, open communication, and not, for example, violating your second duty, which is the duty of honesty and fair dealing to your board, your commission, and your board members. So making sure that you're providing honest feedback and you're dealing in a fair way with everybody. There are two other duties, which for lawyers, which a lot of you are, come pretty natural: duty to abide by the law and duty to abide by board rules. But I think the main crux here and the issues that I've seen cause the most problem is balancing that change maker role, which is valid, with your duty of loyalty, and making sure you and collectively all of you know how to strike that balance. And usually it involves open communication, forewarning of any actions, and just everybody keeping at the forefront that the reason they're sitting in that position is to make the commission better. Any questions? All right. So how do we establish common expectations amongst each other? This is not a legal requirement. This now is me speaking from 20 years of board experience advising boards and commissions. Many of you also have extensive experience on boards and commissions, so I welcome interruptions or comments. But in a nutshell, I always advise that each board every year review your bylaws. And sometimes we call them bylaws, sometimes we call them board working rules of order. These should contain not only your statutory and procedural requirements, so everybody knows what a quorum is, what your voting rights are, all that, which we will discuss later, but also what your common expectations of each other are. And here's why. I'm guessing y'all are getting along right now, and everybody is not only professionally respected, but personally liked. That, knock on wood, will always be the case. However, if you hit a bumpy road and you have divisive issues or an event that causes strife, you will have a document that guides you on how you are going to work together during that time. Because we don't need really to refer to this document when we're all getting along. It's when we're not. And so I always recommend that you review your bylaws or your working rules of order and come to common expectations. What are your expectations of each other? For example, if you're going to go to the legislature in your private capacity, do you have common expectations that you'll let each other know? If you're going to talk to the press, do you have a common expectation that you'll let somebody know? And what does that mean to let somebody know? Does that mean sharing your press statements? Does that mean sharing a summary? Does that mean giving you an hour's warning? Those are things you should discuss now while you're getting along, right? And what are your expectations regarding informing staff and working with staff on issues? I use the examples of press or legislature, but it could also be any common divisive issue. If there's litigation going and you're meeting with plaintiffs because you happen to agree with them, is that okay? And if it is okay that you're meeting with the other side, do you expect that you will share any information you've learned with the board members? I don't know, but these are great things to talk about, and they don't implicate legal duties, but they will help you keep the peace if you talk about them now. Some of the commitments are, how do we build an agenda? Right now, your bylaws say very typically that your chair working with staff will set the agenda. Let me ask you, what happens if a board member wants to talk about an issue and that issue is not on the agenda? I think you should talk about, how does an individual board member get the issue on the agenda? What are your common expectations regarding that? Typically, a board member would talk to the chair and staff about their idea and say, hey, I'd like to get this on the agenda. Is this possible? Often, that chair and staff will review it and meet with the board member and say, hey, this is a great idea. I think here's my input on what we should bring. This is why I think we should change your idea a little bit, or the process a little bit. For example, it could have been brought up 4 times already and the decision already been made last year. It could violate statute in some way, so the staff can advise you on that. It could trigger some ethics laws, so they could advise you on that. And they could get rid of all those really easy problems so that when and if you do bring it to the full board for a possible motion, those small niggling things are already taken care of. And you know you have a statutorily compliant, non-repetitive, useful issue to bring before the board. And so building is one of those issues that people often include in their working rules of order and expectations. Same for committee work. How will committee assignments be done? What are their expectations? Does the committee advise only staff? Does the committee advise the rest of the decision-making board? What is the scope of the committee's work, and what's the individual commission members' responsibilities regarding that? Preparation for meetings, that's a good one. How far in advance do you get the materials? Is everybody expected to have read them and come prepared to vote? Participation in meetings is also really important. I did notice in your bylaws that you have a provision in there that don't allow for abstentions unless you have a conflict of interest. I think that's wise. If you allow board members to abstain on politically difficult positions, it weakens your board as a whole. And we don't recommend that. The reason you're on here is to take votes and to take those hard positions. And so participation in meetings includes who gets to abstain. Also, participation in meetings is setting the expectation for some of those board members who may not participate enough that your input is desired and required. It doesn't have to be lengthy or long. It could merely be a comment. I agree with the previous comments and blah, blah, blah. I intend to vote this way when the vote comes. But that silence and kind of taking a back seat isn't something that you expect, and that you have common expectations about what kind of participation is required. We've already talked about making outside representations to legislature, press, or others, and what your expectations are of each other, and the duty to participate I just discussed. Lastly, regarding participation in meetings, and we're going to discuss this again, but it's also wise to discuss with your staff what it really means to gather public comment at meetings. I have seen many a commission and council stuck for years and unable to make critical decisions, wasting public money and time by allowing public comments to take over the entire commission meeting. In other words, I've seen boards have an agenda. It's built out for 12 months. Staff's worked on it to achieve their goals, to get commission input on each goal in a timely way, to get the budget approved in a timely way. It takes a lot of advanced planning. I've seen all of that entirely derailed by public comment, where the board takes public comment, but then enters into a back and forth argument, deliberation, or conversation during the public comment period and beyond. And actually, what they have done unwittingly, if that happens, is they've changed the agenda, and the rest of the agenda may not have time to get addressed. They've also derailed the staff's plan for the year and may have started deliberating or deciding or discussing issues that are beyond their authority to discuss. For example, personnel matters, litigation matters that are confidential, other matters that just they shouldn't be discussed, either because they haven't gotten the proper background, or it's not within their purview. And so I always caution boards, public comment, and you can even provide a statement before public comment periods. This is time for us to listen to you. We are interested in your input. We may have some clarifying questions, but at this time, we don't intend to engage in a back and forth discussion about your input. If we have further questions after talking with our staff, we may reach out to you and we may put this item on a future agenda. But for now, the audience needs to know and our public commenters need to know we are listening and we are taking notes and we are learning, but we're not engaging in this as it's not on the current agenda. And I think that's really important. Again, not legal advice, practical advice to keep your goals chugging along and keep control of your meetings. Any question on that? It's a common problem, but one that's easily handled if you've discussed it ahead of time and everybody understands what the standards are for public comment.
I don't see any hands raised, and I have to say that this is exactly the way we have dealt with public comment in the almost 2 years I've been on the commission. So
Wonderful.
I'm glad to hear that it's approved.
Wonderful. That's unusual and kudos. So I'd like to take a brief moment to tie this all together regarding commission authority and how you as individual commissioners can affect change. The first thing I want you to know your role. Is a meeting needed to do what you want to do? If so, and you're a commissioner and you have a bright idea and you want to bring it forward to a meeting, you'll need to talk with staff and your chair about getting something on the agenda, and they will tell you why that is a good idea or why it's not. For example, perhaps that is already scheduled to be on agenda months from now, and they're still researching the issue to get proper information before the board. Perhaps that issue has been brought up 4 or 5 times already and voted down. I don't know, but I think that discussion is key for you. You may need to work with staff regarding your idea, and the executive director could approve that for you if that's a necessity, and that if he or she believes that will be helpful to eventual teeing it up to bring before the board. We've already talked about testifying and speaking with the press, but knowing your role and knowing how to get something on the agenda and affect action is really important. And those preliminary steps will help you tremendously. Next is know your tools. So if you have a bright idea and you want to bring it before the board, I would suggest reviewing your statutes, your bylaws, your policies and working rules and making sure, oh, we actually do have the authority to do this and it's a good idea and our bylaws express how we're to do it and the policy allows us to do it. It may prescribe certain steps, but look at that and then talk with your staff. And then lastly, know what your working rules of order for voting, motion, it's usually a motion, a second, discussion, a vote. Know about whether the commission will need to delegate any authority to individuals, what their right to delegate certain authority is and is not, and know about what kind of vote count you need. So that's teeing it up. So if you have an idea, these are the steps I suggest you take before just making a motion at a board meeting. Any questions regarding those? It's a lot of homework before you bring an idea forward, but I think it avoids wasting time. It allows you to formulate your idea more succinctly, and the eventual board discussion will be more productive.
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay. Lastly, let's talk about the order of operations for a vote. You have kind of weird, but not too weird, nothing personal. Composition of your board. You've got 13 total members. You've got 9 voting members and 4 non-voting members. Your quorum is a majority of your voting members, meaning 5. So you cannot hold any meeting of your board unless you have 5 voting members present. That is the first hurdle. Without 5 voting members present, no meeting can take place. Further, you have a majority requirement of your voting members to pass any measure, which means to pass any measure, you must have at least 5 voting members voting yay. Sometimes boards and commissions often misunderstand that requirement, and they often think that once they get a quorum, 5 voting members, they merely need a majority of the quorum, which would be 3. That is incorrect. You still need 5. Secondly, once you have a quorum, you must have an item on the agenda. We've already talked about that. Can't be a surprise. And you must have a motion, a second, before you're allowed to have any discussion. And then a clear majority vote. Boards sometimes mistakenly pursue discussion before they have a second. Here's why that's a bad idea. Sometimes you have what I call a board member who is at odds with the rest of the board members and has been voted down on a proposal maybe multiple times during the same meeting, maybe multiple times at every meeting. And if the board is pursuing discussion with just one motion, there is not a great way to exert peer pressure on that person and to keep that person from wasting all the government resources and time expended to have that meeting. And so this ensures that they have to have at least another person that agrees that a discussion is warranted. So that's really important. And it looks to me that you follow that pretty concisely, which kudos to you. We'll talk more later on about the art of making motions and the art of running a meeting that can also help with these issues. But for the purposes of this slide, I want the main takeaway is individuals, commission members, including the chair and your officers, have no greater authority than any other commission member, and in fact, have no authority to act individually. You only have authority in 2 ways. One, through your voting power and through your discussion power for non-voting members. There's only power in numbers, and there's only power for you if you get 5 majority votes. That's it. The second way is if the commission is authorized to delegate certain matters to an individual board member and does that through a proper vote. So if indeed the commission says, hey, board member X or chair X, we would like you to represent us at a conference and make a presentation about what we are doing in X program. They could vote and have you do that, and you're off and running.
You vote, okay.
Yeah. But the reason this is so important for you to understand is it's so easy to violate, especially if you are a board member who is a true believer in your cause and in your board, because many of you, I know, are true public servants and really believe in your support of public defense in Oregon and the public defense system. And so you are a natural advocate and you are a natural persuader. And so it's very easy in that role to kind of step out of your lane and perhaps make promises that you don't have the authority to make, or, for example, try to direct OPDC staff to do certain things that you know as an expert would be useful, but you don't have the authority to direct staff individually, and you don't have authority to make representations to others about the commission's position individually, unless the board has voted to allow you to do that. And I've seen this go sideways in a lot of ways. I have seen city councils meet in executive session to discuss a huge land purchase and development agreement. And the land purchase was confidential. It was that they were discussing how much they would offer for the land. And an individual commission member talked outside of the executive commission and leaked how much they're willing to pay. And the price went up and it skunked the deal. And the commission actually considered bringing a litigation against the individual commissioner. So it's really, really important to stay in your lane, not only to maintain good relations with your fellow board members, to maintain that duty of loyalty to the commission, but also to avoid individual liability. Because when you step outside of your lane, outside of your authorized action, a lot of your liability protections fall away, and you may be liable personally for any kind of outcome of your actions that you took when you stepped outside of your lane. And we'll talk about that later too. Right now, when you're in your lane, you have the coverage of the state DOJ. While we don't represent people individually, we do represent commissions, and commissioners who act within the scope of their authority have certain other liability protections in the DAS risk policies, and we'll provide that for you later too. But this is just an overview. Any questions regarding that you only have power in numbers and you don't really have any individual authority?
I have a question about something you said earlier.
Sure.
And so one of the first things you said was you cannot hold a meeting of the board unless 5 voting members are present. In other words, unless there's a quorum present. So if we notice a meeting, let's say for December 5th, and we get to December 5th and only 4 voting members show up, we can't do anything. Is that what
correct? You can't even call the meeting into order.
We can't even call the meeting into order. We can't chat about this and that.
Nope.
No.
No.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? And I don't see any other hands up.
I will mention one thing that is often a little tricky regarding public meetings law. This will be covered in detail by my colleagues in your later present training. But subcommittees of the board and advisory committees of the board, doesn't matter what you call it, but lesser parts of the board meeting to discuss board business, they are subject to the public meetings law, and your bylaws say that you will follow the public meetings law for such subcommittees. However, if you have a subcommittee or advisory committee that is formed only to advise staff, and staff makes the decision, the eventual decision, those are not subject to public meetings law. And I just want you to think a little bit about that and just plant that seed in your planning processes. And once you get a more full training on public meetings law, I think you'll be able to think about which committees, subcommittees, advisory committees should be advising your staff versus your full board.
Okay, that leads me to another set of questions, and I see that Stephanie Engelsman also has a question. Stephanie, if you don't mind, I'll go first. So we have been having work group meetings, and those are not required participation for board members. And the current bylaws are ambiguous about having those. We're currently discussing how to deal with those in the revised bylaws. Frequently, there is no quorum of the board at one of those workshop meetings. So it's not technically a commission meeting because it's not one where participation is required. It may look sort of more like some kind of subcommittee, but we've been using them not to advise the staff. We've been using them to have discussions of substantive issues that we don't have time to discuss in regularly scheduled board meetings. There are no action items at these workshops. They're just discussions, and reports about the discussions then might get made at a board meeting. Frequently, there is a staff person who is asking for input about something, but my experience is that discussion may be broad. So that the first question is whether we can hold those. My second,
All right, your second.
My second question is a subcommittee is by definition a committee with fewer than the entire board.
Mm-hmm.
So does the subcommittee have to have a subcommittee quorum, and can the subcommittee do anything without having a subcommittee quorum, and how would that work if the subcommittee has, for example, 3 committee members, because we're a small board?
Yeah,
So,
I think these are really good questions. So let's address your work group.
Okay.
The first thing I want to say is that if you are meeting with less than a quorum of your full board, you need to define the actual group in accordance with public meetings law. So, for example, if you're meeting with less than a full board and that group, no matter what it's called, has the power to recommend actions to the full board or make decisions on behalf of the full board, which I'm not hearing you do have, that meeting is a public meeting, and the quorum requirements, the note-taking requirements, the public access, not participation, but access requirements all apply. If you're having informal meetings of board members that are outside of your subcommittee or advisory committee process and procedure, such as the informal work groups to discuss issues, you arguably are having a board meeting without a quorum, which is not allowed. So you need to characterize and provide a process for any meetings of less than a full quorum of the board. and you, as Sean and Dan will train you on, you should actually provide what that subcommittee or lesser committee, what their authority is and is not, because that will determine whether the public meetings apply.
So when we've had those work groups, they have been noticed. There has been an agenda. They have been open to the public. As far as I can tell, the only thing that hasn't happened is a quorum.
So I would still advise that you characterize them in a more formal way, because I think arguably somebody could make the argument that you're meeting without a quorum of your full board because it wasn't a subcommittee or as your bylaws indicate, an advisory committee. Lastly, you also said the requirement to attend, it's not a requirement that they attend.
Right.
I appreciate you adding that. There is nothing in public meetings law regarding a requirement to attend that either triggers or does not trigger the public meetings law. In other words, the law doesn't make that a criteria that it considers. So it's not useful to you to say, oh, but they're not required to attend, right? So that's not a standard that the law considers. And lastly, if you are having unofficial meetings of your board in less than a quorum, in the past, we would have, and I did have, strenuously argued that those are allowed, those are important, that's how boards work, in less than a quorum, as long as you're not promising votes to each other. Excuse me 1 minute, I'm so sorry. My apologies. As long as you're not promising votes to each other, that you can have meetings of less than a quorum. However, ever since the changes in the public meetings law, that standard past advice has been significantly changed because the legislature has changed definitions in the public meetings law that arguably says you can't meet in less than a quorum because it's very likely that you are deliberating and will be taking those deliberations to the board, or it's very likely that this is setting up serial meetings. For example, let's say 3 board members met in a work session or a work group and discussed an issue, and then another board meeting, one of those board members met with 3 other board members and discussed the same issue. That arguably could be an illegal serial meeting under the new legislation. And you'll get more advice regarding that later. But for those reasons, we strongly suggest that you not have informal meetings of less than a quorum right now, just to keep it. And that's conservative advice, but I think it would be very useful advice for you. I'm trying to decide how much more to talk to you about this, because you will get in-depth training on it. But lastly, many of you already know this, but cities and counties, they have what's called work sessions. And that is different than what you've described. A work session, as you know from your bylaws, is a meeting, official public meeting, noticed, treated like a public meeting, but no vote is expected. It's pure discussion, but it's still a public meeting. So I just want to make sure that's not confused with the work group issues that you've discussed.
Right. Stephanie, your question.
Yeah, I just have a really quick question. Thank you. This has been really a great presentation. I'm curious about your, if you have a board of 9 voting, you need a quorum of 5 to call the meeting, and then you also need a majority of the 9, so all 5 yeses, excuse me, in order to pass something. I'm curious what happens if there's 5 present, excuse me, I've got something stuck, and the meeting is called, and then a vote is taken, and it's 4-1 or 3-2. What happens to that? Does it have to go all the way back to the initial beginning steps of a measure or a vote, or can it just simply be? I mean, do we really tie ourselves in knots by calling something with 5 members and then it doesn't pass right then and there? What happens next?
Then the motion fails for lack of a majority vote.
Right,
I
can it just be put on something, say, oh, it failed today, we'll put it on next time, hope that more people are there? Is that possible? Or does it have to go back to square one, whatever square one is?
That is something that I always recommend you discuss when you're looking at your bylaws and working rules. I will tell you that there are rules regarding bringing a measure up for another vote in Robert's Rules of Order. I tend to recommend to boards and commissions that they not be enslaved by Robert's rules. It can get very complicated very fast, and it can be weaponized if you have a dysfunctional board. So generally speaking, you need to discuss when you're adopting your bylaws, what does the board want to do if a motion fails and it goes to a vote? Can it be brought up at the next meeting? Do you need a majority vote to bring it up again? Do you how much must the motion be changed before you need some kind of assent to bring it up again? Or does your board agree together that it can be brought up again, but perhaps not at the next meeting? I don't know. Do you want at least 3/4 consent of your board to bring it up again? Those are issues you should discuss amongst each other and put in your bylaws. All right.
I don't see any other hands up.
Okay. So I'm just looking, we have till 11:45, correct? So I want to talk about some common challenges and recommended best practices. Again, I want to be clear that these are not legal advice, but best practices born from a lot of research regarding boards and advice to and working with Oregon boards and governments in Oregon. So the first thing I think it's really important for board members to understand, especially board members who have been practitioners or employees in the matter that the board handles, is the board's duty is goal setting and policy making, not implementation. Put another way, if you're hiking and you're with a group, the board's duty is to wayfind. We are going to this area. That's our 5-year plan. That's our 3-year plan. And we're going to set goals for the commission based within your statute of where we want to be in 3 to 5 years, what our budget will look like, where we want to go with public defense and the number of public defenders in Oregon that we are hiring versus contracting with, all those things. Those are goal setting and policy making, board direction to staff. How that direction is implemented, what staff does to implement it, hiring, moving resources around from departments, taking how they lobby the issue that you've given them and their strategy for lobbying that issue. All of that is staff decisions. And so we really bifurcate policy versus administration and implementation. And it's really hard. And it would be hard for me, especially if I sat on a board and I had done some of this work in the past and I knew exactly how it should be implemented. It would be hard to take a back seat to that. But that is not your role. Your role is policy and goal setting. And so I think that's a really good way to frame it up if you ever find you're kind of straying into implementation, which is a common issue. I've had, let's just pick on fire districts. I've had fire district board members who have very, very strong opinions about renovating the firehouse and what color the paint should be. Now, board has authority over budget and goals for firehouse. They do not have authority on implementing paint colors and design choices. So that is a good example of policy versus implementation.
So Christy, I see a hand from Ken Sanchagrin. Ken? He seems to
If I
be.
could make it through a day without accidentally muting myself. Thank you so much for this presentation. I have to admit, even as somebody who has participated in many public meetings across different agencies, I am learning so much today. But I was just curious about the last piece that you were discussing about implementation versus kind of high-level policy setting. So does that mean that if the board gives staff general direction to say, we would like you to create a policy regarding something, does the board, and then the staff comes up with the policy language, does that go back before the board, or does that fall into the implementation bucket, or am I oversimplifying the process way too much? I guess I can understand your example. I think it's a great example of the board would like to paint the firehouse, but then the staff chooses which color. But I think that when if the board is setting a policy expectation and then the staff writes the policy, what happens then in that example?
That's a really great question. So I don't think that you're making this mistake, Ken, at all, but I do want to clarify in case there's any misunderstanding in the room that there's policy with a capital P and policy with a lowercase. What we're talking about here for board issues is policy with a capital P, meaning your wayfinding and goal setting duties. Not, for example, if staff is adopting an internal policy regarding what the rules are for staff and board when they travel, how they get reimbursed, what kind of credit cards they can use, how far they can travel, is overnight expenses allowed. That is policy with a lowercase p, and those are administrative actions. Oftentimes, boards can, as a routine approval, review policies and approve them. That is not necessary, but sometimes that is done for those smaller P policies. What I believe you're talking about isn't that, but I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes there's a misunderstanding when we talk policy, what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate that distinction.
Okay.
I think that's good to bear out. Yep.
And so I think what your question was kind of parsing it down a little more finely. The firehouse example was simple. It gets murky really fast, right? So you've asked, hey, board sets a policy with a capital P regarding wayfinding and goal setting. and then instructs in the motion staff to draft the policy. Oftentimes, if I'm reviewing your motion, I would say, I move that the board direct staff to draft a policy to effectuate what we've discussed, including boom, 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 and bring the draft policy before the board at the next meeting for discussion and possible approval. And again, I'm talking only about policy with a capital P.
No, that's helpful because, yeah, if there's a requirement that it actually be explicitly requested in the motion, that definitely helps.
Yeah. And I think that we'll talk about the art of making motions, but that's why it's an art, right? We really want to think about process, what you're thinking about. For example, a lot of motions are, I move that we discuss whether the board should take a position on X and put it on the agenda for the next 3 board meetings and direct staff to provide us background information during those meetings or something to that effect. That way, again, hopefully the board members already talked to staff and the chair and cleared it. But that way, what you're doing is, hey, I don't want to vote on this yet. I'd like us to put this on the agenda for the next 3 staff meetings and staff to provide more background information, et cetera. So motions, you can make motions for things other than decisions, right? You can make motions to establish a practice that sets you up for success. So another common challenge are efficient meetings. We've talked a lot about public participation. I won't go over that again, but just know there is no right to public participation in your meeting. Absolutely none. There is a right to public comment, which is different. If somebody's an interested party and they want to provide public comment and you have that on your agenda as a possibility, you're not required to, but you have that on your agenda, you can you can listen to public comment and not engage in a back and forth. It is not, if somebody wants to participate in your meetings, they can get appointed to the board, right? So they don't get to direct your agenda and hijack your meeting. The second piece for effective meetings is, and I haven't seen this as a problem with your board at all, but is that a chair needs to be a benevolently strong chair, meaning chair is the conductor of your music and you are the orchestra. Chair tells you, okay, now we're going to talk about this issue. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Let's do discussion. Is discussion over? Check with everybody, make eye contact. Yep, discussion is over. Okay, then let's call a vote, repeat what is being voted on, create that rhythm, create that efficiency, and let people know when they are straying and get pulled back in. If things are going sideways, calling a break, talking to people, exerting a little peer pressure. Hey, listen, you're going beyond the scope of the agenda. You're repeating yourself. Doing those actions will create an efficient meeting, and peer pressure amongst yourself is key to that. And it's not negative. It's just the way committees and boards work and how you keep meetings efficient. Put another way, if you are a chair of a board or commission and your heart starts beating a little fast and you're recognizing dissent and disorder and you don't know what to do about it. You might be broken out into a cold sweat. You're just kind of figuring this out. I guarantee you that at least 90% of your audience and probably 50% or more of your board is looking to you to control and manage the situation. So if your heart starts beating fast and you're like, I don't know if I should act, yeah, you should probably act. And we have whole trainings for chairs on how to do that. And there are official and non-official ways to do that. But the agenda is one of them, right? And lastly, common challenges is not only just interference with your director or staff duties, but also, I'd say, unintentional attempts to change staff direction, to guide staff, or to participate in the administrative implementation, which is not your role. And usually this is not intentional. Usually it's completely benevolent, good intentions, but I've seen it go sideways a lot of times. For example, even to the extent that boards hear a presentation from a staff member and want to go on record saying, hey, thank you, staff member X. I think you're doing an amazing job. I always appreciate what you bring to us. And I hope you stay with us forever. And I really like what you're doing. Boards love doing that. They love giving compliments. That's fine. But I would be careful because you don't know if that staff member's under disciplinary action and about to be let go. You don't know if, in fact, they haven't been a great staff member. So I would be careful with your compliments. You don't know if the particular presentation was entirely correct all the time. So inserting yourself in personnel matters or the implementation issues or staff duties or calling staff saying, have you done this yet? Can often be very, very disruptive. To simplify, going back to the fire district issue, I had a former fire chief sit on the board, and he would come and have coffee with staff in the firehouse every morning and say, hey, you should do that, or you should move that, or you should do that. And he had always been a friend and a colleague of all these people. And they had always had those conversations for 20 years. And he used to be in charge of that. But that wasn't his role now. And it really interfered with pending personnel actions. It caused some unintended liability and litigation. And we had to put the kibosh on having coffee in the morning, which was a shame. But you don't know what you don't know when you're a board, and you're just not involved in the day-to-day. To insert yourself in the day-to-day is risky. Any questions?
I don't see any hands.
All right. So these are also common challenges. I'm not seeing that you have a lot of these common challenges. We've already talked about development of working rules. I can't stress enough. You guys call them your bylaws, but to make them, to address not only the formal statutory requirements such as quorum and voting, but also to discuss, hey, how are we going to treat each other? Are you going to give me a heads up when you're giving a press release? Are we going to just agree that there's not going to be name calling or interrupting? Are we going to agree that if the chair asks you to stop with your comments that are out of order, that you'll do that? Just things like that, I think, really make it useful. if indeed you ever do kind of have a declination into dissension, I always recommend that while you're getting along, you instill some formalities into your relationship. Y'all might have been good friends for 20 years, which is fine. But when you're sitting there at the dais, you talk about somebody as Commissioner so-and-so. You use titles. It really does help you understand that right now I have my board member hat on. Difficult board member, that can be a problem. There are lots of ways to solve it. There's meetings with the chair, meetings with your insurer, meetings with your legal counsel, positive peer pressure, education, taking breaks, requiring that every motion have a second, making rules regarding when you can bring an issue up that's already been voted down. All of that can forestall a difficult board member or a fractured board. And if you are experiencing those problems, I'm happy to assist your staff with some ways to fix them. So we have 15 minutes. I'd like to move on. These liability issues, there are different bases of potential liability for board members, stepping outside of your scope of duties, such as sharing confidential info, taking on executive director duties, etc. If indeed you step outside and cause an action that creates liability for either the commission or your personal liability for yourself, if you've stepped outside of your scope of duties, you may not be covered under the state's liability protection umbrella. So we want to stay within scope of duties. There's other causes of actions, that have personal financial liability, such as if you misexpend funds. That's very rare, and usually your staff will guard against that, and your processes. If you take an action that puts money, an official action as a board member that puts money in your own pocket or avoids financial liability, you could have Oregon government ethics liability. And if you commit a criminal action or a civil cause of action outside of the scope of your duties, you could lose a lot of those state protections. The protections are listed here. You've got several statutory and constitutional protections. This should say state, not district. The state has a duty to defend and indemnify you when you're acting within the scope of your employment, scope of your authority. The action has to be brought against a public body, not an individual. There are several immunities that apply. So those are the protections. And lastly, I provided the language of your insurance fund protections here for your for your reading enjoyment. But I'd like to move on to talk about public meetings, public records, and ethics, because that's the most important piece in the last 15 minutes. I have 2 slides for public meetings. I've actually done a public meetings training that takes 2 days. I will never subject you to that. But public meetings can be very complicated. You're going to get a more comprehensive training from my colleagues on this later. But in general, I just want you to know that the public meetings law applies to all meetings, whether they're work group or anything, all meetings of a governing body, the commission, of a public body, the agency, for which a quorum is required. Interesting. So we have to think about that in order to make a decision or to deliberate. So there are boxes we need to check, and it can get complex, but that's the general rule. We talked about quorum required to hold a meeting, majority of voting commission members required for a vote. A word of caution that you'll be trained on later: emails, texts, instant messaging, or using intermediaries to discuss issues between board members have in the past by courts been determined to be illegal meetings. They've also been determined to be illegal meetings, even if a quorum wasn't discussing, emailing, texting, instant messaging, or using an intermediary, if it was less than a quorum. That the reason that it's been found to be a violation is because courts have found that the members acted with a purposeful intent to circumvent public records law, or members in fact created a de facto serial meeting. This is how it might look. Commissioner sends an email to another commissioner. Hey, what do you think about this idea? Do you think this is something I should talk to staff about putting on the agenda? And another commissioner says, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. You should talk to the staff. I don't know how I'd vote. I'm not promising a vote, but yeah, right there, likely not a public meeting violation. But let's say one of those people takes it to another commissioner member and says, hey, so-and-so, Commissioner A was thinking about this. What do you think about it? Oh, I think this is a bad idea, and here's why. And then all of a sudden, we've got 3 discussing an issue back and forth. And if any one of them then talks to enough commissioners to comprise a quorum, then you've got a de facto illegal public meeting. Sometimes the way the new legislation has been interpreted and the way some courts have interpreted it, you can have a violation even if you don't reach a quorum on those little side conversations, which I call minute here, minute here. Okay, you go talk to so-and-so, we'll gather votes, and then we'll have a meeting. That's not allowed. The in-between where you're just conferring with each other, that gets tricky, right? And you really want to avoid it. So if you have one-on-one conversations or texts or instant messages with your other commissioners, I always recommend you say something to this effect. Thanks for this email. Please don't forward it to any other commissioners. I think you should talk to staff. Thanks for asking. My opinion sounds like a good idea. I won't talk to any other commissioners either. You know that you've discussed that. That'll be protection for you. And these are just right here. These are just the requirements of a public meeting. You got to have notice at least 24 hours in advance. We usually recommend 2 weeks. You got to have a space and location that's accessible. And the space has to be noticed and available to the public. The voting requirements we've already discussed. You must keep minutes. And if you must keep minutes of executive sessions also, which you'll be trained on, but those minutes are confidential, so you'll be trained on that too. So that's the really short primer for public meetings.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
You were very careful to say when you were talking about serial communications, which I think is the biggest scary part. You were very careful to say, as an example of the serial communication, you talk to me and say, I think ABC, and then I talk to Tom, and I say, I talk to Christy, and Christy says she thinks ABC. I assume the same problem exists under the following scenario. This is nitpicking.
Okay.
You talk to me and you say, I support ABC. I talk to Tom and say, here's an idea, ABC. What do you think? So I haven't mentioned that everybody else by name has talked to me. I assume that's still a serial communication issue. Am I right?
We don't know yet. because the new law hasn't been tested. And that's exactly the issue that's being discussed in a public records work group right now. And my old employer, way back when I worked for the League of Cities, is taking up that charge and kind of going to the mat saying, hey, we need elected officials and commission members to be able to discuss things in less than a quorum. So who knows what's going to happen from that, but that is the crux. So what the DOJ advice has been is don't do it, because we don't know yet. And you don't know what the person you're talking to, what they're going to do with that information. And there is no intent standard. So you can't say, oh, I didn't intend to break the public meetings law. I was just having a conversation.
Thank you. That's good. That's a good clarification.
All right. I think the meetings as an art form we've talked about the chair as a conductor, setting the agenda, choosing the score of the music. Practice is circulating materials and minutes in advance, talking to staff about your ideas before presenting them to the board. We talked about formalities and adhering to them. We've talked about the rhythm of the music, motion, second, discussion, vote. We haven't really talked about restating the vote and the motion. Maybe I'm overly critical or pedantic. My staff would say, yes, I am. But I believe watching hundreds of board, commission, council meetings that probably around 40 to 50% of the motions that are voted on do not enjoy a common understanding amongst the body voting on them. In other words, I believe that at least 40% of the time, boards members do not know what they're voting on when they vote. That is because the motions are either not specific enough or because the chair has not grabbed a hold of the motion and asked for clarifying information. And often motions morph during discussion. Well, actually the discussion morphs and people assume the motion changes, but you need official action from the movement to change the motion. And so a lot of times they'll say, okay, let's take a vote. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing the eyes of each voting member, and I know they don't have a common understanding of what they're voting on. And so I always say, chair needs to restate the motion, clarify any misunderstandings, make sure everyone understands prior to a vote. And I think that will very much clear up a lot of issues. We've already talked about Robert's rules, using a modified, simplified rules of order. And we already talked about public participation and work sessions. So we won't go into detail on that. We don't have a lot of time. Public record, all I want to say, I really want to get to conflicts of interest. For public records, almost everything is public records, and we're going to presume it's disclosable, even if it's on your cell phone and you're discussing commission business, even if it's in your private IMs, even if it's to your private email. What you've done by using those mechanisms to discuss business is you've subjected your private emails, phones, and devices to potential public records searches. So that's what I want to just discuss there. And go on for government ethics. There are 3 rules, but I want to go down to conflicts of interest because they're going to be the most applicable and most useful to you. So the general rule under 244.040 is that public officials, their public officials and your relatives, anyone living off of you or in your house, and any business with which you're associated cannot receive a financial benefit or financial detriment based on your decisions as a public official. So if you're voting and you happen to be a public defender, which, and you think this vote could end up getting you more work, that is a vote that could violate the ethics rules. And the way you cure that is through the conflicts of interest process. There are two types of conflicts of interest in Oregon and federally and for most ethics: an actual conflict and a potential conflict. An actual conflict is, let's see, an actual conflict is something that definitely will put money in your pocket or help you avoid losing money or cause you to lose money. So have a financial effect on you. Or most likely will in the future do it. And a potential conflict is something that could or would give you a financial benefit or detriment. To cure those conflicts, there are different types of processes. For both actual and potential, you are required to declare the conflict and state the general nature of the conflict. Before you vote or discuss the matter, it must be done on the record, and it should be done each time the issue is discussed. So what does that look like? I'm a commissioner. I believe that, and my brother is a PD, and I believe that this might put money in his pocket because it's going to open up work for him. I just say, hey, I want to declare a conflict. The nature of the conflict is that I have a relative who is a public defender, and at this vote may provide more opportunities for work for him. It's a potential conflict. I don't know if that's going to happen. So I am just discussing that before I vote or discuss this matter. And then you look to the record keeper and you say, can you please put this on the record? And you discuss it each time that is discussed. And then that cures the potential conflict. So you, in simplified terms, for potential conflicts, shout it out. For actual conflicts, you gotta, to be crass, shout it out, then shut it up.
So I see a question, and I think you're frozen, Christy. Can you hear me? Christy, I think she's frozen. Tom, can you hear me?
I can, and I do think she's frozen.
Yeah,
My question is for Christy, so I think I need to wait until
I think so too, but
she
she's still,
becomes unfrozen.
I'm not sure she knows she's frozen. I think she's gone. Let's see if she comes back.
So we can talk about that later.
Christy, you were frozen for about 2 minutes. And we didn't hear you. And in the meantime, Tom Leininger has a question for you.
Please.
Thanks again for this presentation. And the part where we can no longer hear you is when you shifted from potential conflicts to actual conflicts. But I just wanted to confirm my understanding is correct, that conflicts have to do with enriching one's relatives, right? And many of us, whether people work in practice settings or I work at a law school, and the OPDC considers from time to time investing in law schools. So, I mean, that's a degree of attenuation, right? It doesn't redound to the benefit of me or my wife, who also works here, directly enough that it's cognizable as a conflict, I suppose, right? Only where there's a more direct possibility of enrichment of a family member do we have to worry about conflicts. Is that a correct statement?
It's partially correct, and I'm really glad you asked that question. So conflicts apply not only to you, to your family members, and it's pretty broad, pretty much anybody except your cousins, and a business with which you're associated. So, for example, if OPDC was making, if a motion was made to provide funding to a law school, and you work at a law school, if in fact you work training or teaching people to be public defenders, and that money could possibly be used to fund your position, I would say that's a potential conflict, and your obligation is to declare it before the vote. It's potential because you don't know what the money will be used for, how your administration will assign that money.
But if the money goes directly to another category of employee, it wouldn't count.
Yeah, but you don't know that yet, right? So I would say in an excess of a caution, I would declare a potential and describe the nature and why. Now, if you absolutely know the money is going to be used to fund, say, a relative's position, then it's an actual, or most likely will be used. It's probably an actual. And just to recap what I said when I was frozen, in an actual conflict, you have the same declaration issues. You have to shout it out, but then you shut it up. No voting, no discussing the matter. And in an excess of caution, I usually recommend that you step down from the dais when that's being discussed.
Thank you. Caitlin Plummer also has a question.
Hi, Christy. Thanks for this presentation. I am a non-voting member of the commission because I'm the director of a public defense agency that contracts with OPDC. So it is assumed that I have perhaps many conflicts with decisions that the commission is discussing. So obviously I'm not voting, but I could be participating in a discussion or offering information that relates to a vote that could affect my agency. Is that a conflict that I need to declare even though I'm not a voting member?
Yes. And here's why. You are tasked with discussing and deliberating that issue. And if you're good at your job, you will be persuasive. And so you have a public official position where you get to sway the voting members. And that in itself could be a conflict. So I would, if I were you, act in an excess of caution and declare a potential in those circumstances where you're going to be, where an issue is on the agenda that could or would put money in your pocket, or take money out of your pocket, a relative's pocket, a person who lives with you's pocket, or a business with which you are associated's pocket.
And thank you. And then for a situation where there's an actual conflict, which would also come up, would that be a situation where I should not participate at all in the discussion?
Correct. So if it's an actual conflict, you still declare it, but then you shout it out, then you shut it up, meaning no discussing, no deliberating on the matter. Why do they say no discussing? Because you could be persuasive.
So I have always assumed that the reason the legislature put 2 providers and 2 legislators on the commission as non-voting members was so that those of us who are neither providers nor legislators can get the wisdom of their experience
Yep.
when we're trying to make decisions or discuss issues. And if somebody like Caitlin can't even talk when there's a actual conflict of interest, because if we're talking about funding nonprofit public defenders, it's going to affect her employer. Um, why is she even there? If we can't get her input on something that she knows about better than any of us,
Great question. I have
I
an
don't
answer.
understand.
I have an answer.
I don't understand how
The
this.
law says it is not a conflict if the financial benefit or detriment happens because of membership in a nonprofit. So, for example, if it might financially affect a nonprofit, a PD association that's providing PD services, that is not a conflict if they have a 501c status. However, if the person is employed by that nonprofit and could financially benefit because they are taking OPDC cases through that nonprofit, that is a separate matter and you don't enjoy that exception.
So I'm back to the same question. I mean, first of all, do you have a site for the law that says that?
Yeah, it's 244 conflicts of interest. Let's see, I didn't put that in there. I'll find it for you. Let me see if I put it up here.
But then we're back to the same question, because the providers that we have as non-voting members take cases.
Yeah.
I mean, they are not associated with a nonprofit. They either work for a nonprofit, or in the case of hourly providers or providers who have contracts individually with us, they get money from us. And so I'm back to the same question. If they're on the board to provide us with the insight coming from their experience, which I assume is why they're there, these rules make it impossible for them to do what they're there to do.
I agree. I believe that, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to put together this. The law doesn't take into account those issues, and to protect you the most, because ethics law and violation of conflicts of interest could be personal liability, the best option is for actual conflicts. And those are something that will definitely financially affect somebody, or would affect somebody, not could possibly. Those would be potential, and you can still talk and discuss.
I would say the right hand of the legislature doesn't know what the left hand is doing. They've passed both rules.
But the other challenge I wanted to mention, and I tried to look in your statute while you were talking, your statute, the new recommendations also prohibit you from having anybody on your board that is a public defender. I don't know how you've straddled that, but that's an issue that you should discuss and maybe come to an agreement about what that means. But you're right. I think you're right to point that out. I still stand by our most conservative advice to protect your board members personally from ethics liabilities, that you would follow the actual conflict of interest process. However, I agree that this is a problem for this particular board because of your voting and non-voting. I also believe, and I don't know this for a fact, but it's just from my experience, that the Oregon Ethics Commission might trend towards the more conservative view that I'm espousing. The way you could get clarification on that is to seek an opinion from the board and perhaps an exemption. The board has posited, and I never like using this exemption, but where did it go? Oh, here it is. There is no conflict of interest if the person belongs to a membership of a class, which is a large, distinguishable group of citizens that will all benefit in the same way. So, for example, the easiest example of this is City Council is considering whether to make improvements to a park. There are 100 houses around the park. One of the counselors owns one of those houses. The OGAC could determine that they belong to a membership of a large group and that they could vote. I don't know. Maybe it has to be 500. I don't know. But the key here is that we don't know, because the law actually says only the Oregon Ethics Commission can determine what a class is. So
I'm sorry, it's noon and we have now lost our quorum. So I guess
we can, and these are questions that if you'd like us to follow up with you on those, we can. But thank you for your time. My apologies for going over.
This was a great presentation, Christy. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is wonderful. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. I think I'm supposed to declare the meeting to be over, so it's over.
Bye, everyone.